All right, thank you all for joining today. We are very excited to be hosting this panel discussion and are really grateful to our panelists for sharing with the SYCL community their valuable advice and expertise related to publishing. I'd also like to quickly thank ADLM staff Jordan Bradford and fellow SYCL core committee members Drs. Jamie Noguez and Lucia Sepiashvili for helping to organize today's event. My name is Anna Merrill, and I'll be your moderator for today's panel discussion on publication strategies and opportunities. And this is a really important topic for people at all stages of their career, but today's session is tailored specifically for early career professionals. And we hope to tackle a couple of important topics, such as why publishing is important for SYCL members, how different journals select authors for articles that are commissioned, and what it takes to be an effective reviewer of manuscripts. Before we get started, I want to quickly review some housekeeping items. So the structure of the webinar will start with brief presentations by each panelist before moving into the Q&A portion for the remainder of our time together. So we ask that all attendees please mute themselves now and stay muted for the entirety of the session. There will be plenty of time for questions, but please enter your questions into the chat and we will address those during the Q&A portion. I'll now introduce our panelists and have each of them briefly introduce the publication they are representing, and specifically focusing on opportunities for SYCL members. So our first panelist is Dr. Dustin Bunch. He is the co-director of laboratory informatics and assistant director of clinical chemistry at Nationwide Children's Hospital and is an assistant clinical professor at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. Dr. Bunch is currently the chair of the editorial board for Clinical Laboratory News, or CLN. Our second panelist is Dr. Allison Chambliss. Dr. Allison Chambliss is an associate clinical professor in the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine at the University of California, Los Angeles. She serves as UCLA's Health Director of Laboratory Stewardship and also as a clinical chemistry director. Dr. Chambliss is an associate editor for the Journal of Applied Laboratory Medicine and the managing editor for Clinica Chimica Acta. Today, she is joining us in her role as the 2023-2024 president of ADLM's Academy of Diagnostics and Laboratory Medicine. Our third panelist is Dr. Rob Christensen. Dr. Rob Christensen is professor of pathology and professor of medical and research technology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore. He is principal investigator and director of the Clinical Core Research Laboratory at Maryland that specializes in government and industry-sponsored clinical trials. Dr. Christensen is also medical director of the core laboratories and point-of-care services at the University of Maryland Medical Center. He was the recipient of the 2023 AACC Outstanding Lifetime Achievement Award in Clinical Chemistry and Laboratory Medicine. Dr. Christensen is currently editor-in-chief of the peer-reviewed Journal of Applied Laboratory Medicine. And our final panelist is Dr. Jason Park. Dr. Jason Park is the Robin M. Jacoby Professor in Biomedical Science and Professor in the Department of Pathology and the Eugene McDermott Center for Human Growth and Development at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. He is also the clinical director of the Advanced Diagnostics Laboratory at Children's Medical Center in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Park's clinical and research interests are in clinical genomics, informatics, and pediatric gastrointestinal diseases. He is the author or co-author of over 250 journal articles, book chapters, and published abstracts, and he currently serves as editor-in-chief for ADLM's journal, Clinical Chemistry. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bunch to do his presentation on clinical laboratory news.
Thank you, Anna. So Clinical Laboratory News is a trade journal, essentially. We have publications that go out. We have a readership of about 42,000 people on our print and about 76,000 on our electronic output. We are essentially trying to offer practical insights and news about the field of laboratory medicine and clinical chemistry to the larger lab medicine community. We do have about 80,000 unique visitors to CLN content on the ADLM website, which accounts for about 30% of all ADLM visits. And in recent surveys that we've performed, people regularly read CLN content, and whether that's from the print version or the electronic version. and they also find it extremely useful and very useful. So we are a more generalized topic for publication. If we go to the next slide. So we have a structured board. The CLN Board of Editors is a invite members to publish. So we are generally not receiving applications to publish routinely. We have 3 different formats we use: mini reviews, which is about 2,500 words, and it's from an expert perspective. And as the name, it is a small review on a very niche topic. We have the Ask the Experts, and we have Bench Matters. So those are the 3 big publications that we actually have in CLN that is from members of the society or members of the community. CLN Board of Editors meets twice a year. And during that time, we actually do selection for our possible topics at those brainstorming sessions. And during that process, we spend about 4 to 5 hours ranking, selecting possible topics and possible speakers for those topics. And then we go and solicit those from people. So people that are interested in getting published should really reach out to an editor member. The editor members on the ADLM website, but it's also, if you get the print copy right inside the publication, that allows you to present an idea to someone that's going to then do brainstorming sessions with us, but it's also going to put your name as one of the people that we more likely would reach out to write those publications. And so we usually select 15 to 20 possible topics, and that keeps us going for about 9 months of the year. So we're always trying to keep ahead of what's coming in, and not everything comes in on time. So we also offer honorarium to those that get their articles in on time. And I think that's the main focus. You could reach out to me or Bill Malone for more information, but I'll let the next person go.
Thanks, Dr. Bunch. I think Dr. Chambliss is up next.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. So I'm here to represent the Academy of Diagnostics and Laboratory Medicine, also known as simply the Academy within our organization. So we are not a publication per se. We are a group of ADLM members. Eligibility is listed on our website, but we are ADLM fellows, or ADLM members rather, can apply to be fellows of the Academy. And so once you do that, you would have the designation FADLM. So eligibility is open to ADLM members who have doctoral degrees and who have distinguished themselves as laboratory medicine expert. And as I mentioned, more specific eligibility requirements are listed on our website. And so I'm here today to really focus on our publications. So we oversee several different types of publications as the Academy. So we're probably best known for our guidance documents. So these are designed to provide expert recommendations on topics of interest in laboratory medicine, and they're written by writing groups tasked by the Academy Council. And prior to their final publication, they go through several rounds of review by different groups of the organization, including a final approval by the ADLM's board of directors. And so this means that they can have the organization's name and brand associated with their publication. There's a similar group of documents, or category of documents, to the guidance documents called Laboratory Medicine Practice Guidelines, or LMPGs. These go through a similar process to guidance documents, but they're typically much longer than guidance documents and include a full systematic review and provide true evidence-based recommendations with an evidence grading system. So they're much more intensive to write, and they typically take several years to complete. Maybe a little bit more approachable to start with would be something like our optimal testing guide. So this is a joint initiative between the Academy and the ADLM Science and Practice Core Committee, and it focuses on commonly misused laboratory tests and is intended to provide brief evidence-based recommendations on how to use or not use a certain test. So each test guide is concise and focused on a single test and typically is brief, like maybe less than a page of text. And those are posted on our website under an optimal test guide section. And then finally, we also oversee the Academy's scientific shorts. So these are informal, brief articles that are meant to discuss current clinical laboratory topics or issues, and where possible to present solutions or best practices for those issues. And like I mentioned, these are typically short, less than 1,000 words, typically written by a single person or maybe a pair or a small group, and they're posted on our website. And so these publications, I can get into this in the Q&A, but we have committees in the Academy that oversee all of these different types of publication types. And so to be on those committees requires Academy fellowship or associate fellowship. However, to participate as an author, the Academy fellowship is not required. So anyone can participate in any of these publications. Next slide. And so I wanted to highlight what I think are good opportunities specifically for SYCL members. So certainly the scientific shorts, also authoring an optimal test guide, and either for a scientific short or an optimal test guide, you can either recommend a topic or, kind of nominate yourself to write a topic. And on our website, each of these sections has their own section of our website where it explains, how to contact us or how to contact the chair of the committee of that group to express your interest in a certain topic or an authoring. You could also participate in a guidance document writing group. So typically to chair a guidance document, which the chair is chosen by the Academy Council, these people typically have several years of experience in a certain topic and have established themselves as an expert in that topic. But I think that there are definitely opportunities for SYCL members to participate in writing groups. And if you don't participate on the writing group, what you could do is to help us peer review those guidance document drafts, because they all go through an open comment period. And so anyone is open to submit comments, and you can actually do so anonymously, or you can have your name associated with those comments. So whenever there's an open comment period, there's typically an email that's sent out, and a post may go on the artery, and it has a link to provide feedback via a comment form. And then, of course, if and when you are eligible, we encourage you to apply for fellowship with the Academy, volunteer with our committees that oversee all of these publications. And for more information, I really encourage you to go to our website. We've actually really enhanced it over the past year. We've added a lot more information about, how to get involved, who to contact for what. And we have an FAQ section that kind of nicely summarizes this and points to all of the different links. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Move on to the next presenter, Dr. Christensen.
Yes, well, thank you, Anna, so much. And thank you very much to the committee for inviting me to speak today. I'm representing the Journal of Applied Laboratory Medicine, where I have the privilege of being the editor-in-chief. Here on this first slide, we always pick out a paper from an issue to highlight and put on the cover. So this one will be upcoming on respiratory viruses over to the right. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're kind of a new kid on the block. We were started in 2017, where we didn't even have article types that were put together. So we started off right at the very beginning. At first, we didn't have listing on PubMed. It was difficult to get material, but now we now are listed on PubMed and through the National Library of Medicine. We got our first impact factor just about a year ago. We'll have that updated in the next couple of months, I'm told. Right now, we're ranked 18th out of 32 indexed laboratory medicine journals. The immediacy index as shown. And basically, we look upon our mission as promulgating transitional laboratory medicine, but we encourage the very best and most innovative papers in our field. And I have the view that there is no such thing as basic science versus applied science versus clinical. There's just good science and bad science. So I think if you have ideas on good science, please give us a chance to examine that. We also try to improve our reputation and the recognition of ADLM. We've worked with Allison a lot in working in publishing guidelines and special issues, and also collaborate with groups in DEI. Many of our papers are methods papers and special reports, and basically they're relatively highly cited because of the clinical trials that they help support. Now, we also have, we're fortunate to have, our sister publication, Clinical Chemistry, which we can collaborate with and try to get in harmony for all the areas where it makes sense. DEI language is one that we've worked on recently, disclosures, policies, and so on. We really, so the peer review journals do try to work together. Next slide, please. Okay, so basically what we work to do and what we enjoy feedback from you and others, everybody on this call and others, is to improve, how can we improve our position? How can we improve the services that we provide folks? This, the top bullets here were from a study that Allison put together actually for us. She's one of our associate editors, and did a survey. So these are areas that we are particularly interested in. Every year, we do a special issue. This year's, or for the 2025 January issue, we will be working with diagnostic stewardship. If you have anything that you're interested in this area, or would like to contact us about, please feel free to do so. We're looking for material to publish in this area. Excuse me. We also have taken measures such as changing case reports. We had a section called case reports, which many groups, in fact, those that are calculating the impact factor, felt like, or they felt like this was research. So basically, that was counted as part of our impact factor, which we felt like was inappropriate. So we changed the name to case studies and make these more like what you might see in clinical chemistry and other like publications. Next slide, please. For my last slide, I just wanted to sum up something relevant to this group in particular, and that's SYCL interactions and engagement. You know, when I got started in this field, gosh, back in very early 1980s, basically when you went to an annual meeting, it was a very lonely place. Everybody knew more than you did. You would seek out folks. There was no way to meet people. And now this wonderful program that ADLM has, the SYCL, really helps. And I couldn't be more pleased with the way this has evolved. And we've always had, right from the very beginning, a SYCL liaison as part of our editorial group. And so this past year, we felt like we could do better. We felt like we could do more with these folks. And Jamie is our first, is going to be our trial balloon here, the first year. And basically what we wanted to do was get more engagement, and get more timely feedback from the liaison and the mentor, Bethany Collingam, who works with them. And then every month we have the liaison to the editorial executive committee to discuss their experience, what's going well, what can we do better, etc. And also assign papers to the liaison to handle under the along with the mentor, so that they're not out there cast by themselves. Some of the things that we and so as wonderful as the SYCL liaison program has been, it's pretty limited, right? Only one person a year can do this. We'd like to do something that's a little broader, and think about how we can help you with the growth of your careers. One is that one that we're thinking about right now is to try to get a group that could do service to their profession, which is reviewing papers would be a great one. And then maybe evolve that into an editorial board membership, or even associate editors. Many of our liaisons have joined the group as associate editors with us. So we are thinking about putting together a cycle review group. That is folks contacting the journal saying, hey, you know, I would really like to review for the journal. My areas of expertise are X, Y, and Z, and we'll send you a form about that. And then we can have our associate editors invite you to review and have you get more engaged with the journal that way, help us out in that way, and also get some experience in doing this and grow your career in that way. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to the next speaker. And again, thanks very much for allowing me to participate in this program.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. I loved your comment about good science. That really resonated with me. Okay, now I'll have Dr. Park talk a little bit about clinical chemistry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Park, and I'm here representing the journal Clinical Chemistry. I've been serving as editor-in-chief for about 2 years now. Next slide. So Clinical Chemistry is an interesting journal because it was founded almost immediately after the association was founded. So going back to the 1950s. And I find the history of it interesting. I've displayed here a bunch of the covers over the years of the journal and how it's changed over time. But the reason it was originally established was the members of AACC at that time had been publishing in JBC. And those of you who have done PhDs in the biological sciences, you're probably familiar with this journal. But in the 1950s, JBC decided that it didn't want to publish these clinical lab methods. So one of the original charges of the journal was to take and be able to share their methods because JBC was no longer an avenue. And so the journal was created. And since that time, it has really evolved. And much like the association has evolved in the name change of the association, the journal has also undergone a parallel evolution. So if we look at the contents of any of the issues of clinical chemistry now, it's not just classical clinical chemistry, but includes a wide areas of almost any analytical type of method you can think of that is used in healthcare. Next slide. Now, I'm looking forward to the Q&A session today, but what I would like to kind of have you think about as you're early in your careers is what are your opportunities with clinical chemistry and what are your opportunities for academic publishing? Now, I don't think everyone in SYCL is necessarily going to go into academic medicine, but for those of you that are, publishing is a key part of how you can develop as an individual and develop an area of expertise and be recognized for that expertise. And that development that you may undergo will also be reflected in what you do for medical journals. Now, that being said, what's going on right now in academic publishing and authorship, advances in artificial intelligence for writing, who knows what it's going to look like 10 years from now. But if we think about in general, this idea that we're going to do research of some type and we're going to publish it or present it. And then if we think about the old model here, this is where we can think of right now, how would you get involved with clinical chemistry or any academic journal for that matter? And it begins with authorship. And these can be original research publications. I think this is what we traditionally think about in terms of academic publications. And early in your career, I think what I would encourage you to think about is thinking about collaborations. Not just research collaborations, but also writing collaborations, also mentorship collaborations. I would say the most interesting articles that and studies that I've been part of are where I'm either learning from someone or they're learning from me. So, when I was a trainee and, doing a study and writing it up with a mentor, or conversely, now it's working with a lot of, people still in training and then me being part of guiding those studies. And there's a very practical part of this, which is when you're starting out, it's hard to select topics. And it's sometimes, I always had this problem, it's sometimes hard to figure out what you're going to include in this study and how you're going to write it up. So if you can have a co-pilot or a mentor, I think that makes many of these writing projects much easier. Now, some of the other types of projects for writing and publishing are reviews and clinical case studies. We have several of these other ones I've listed here for clinical chemistry. For clinical chemistry, our review type articles are invited. If you have a hot topic in your mind, you can certainly contact myself or other editors of the journal. We're usually looking for experts in the field. But that being said, if you're really interested in a topic and you have that expert in your group or as a mentor, and you can convince them to be part of that article, I think that that would be very appealing. Now, the next step of this at career-wise is becoming a reviewer. And I would say these things are intertwined. I often get asked, well, how can one become more involved in peer reviewing articles? And I think it's intertwined with authorship. So to be selected as a reviewer, the associate editors or myself, we're often looking for someone that has expertise in an area. And that expertise can be demonstrated in a number of ways, but the easiest way is having demonstrated publication, peer-reviewed publications in that area. So authorship will feed into being asked to be a reviewer. And then that will lead us to this last part, which is as you gain experience and are noticed as providing helpful critiques and helping papers, become better through the review process, you will be noticed. And then that is how we select editorial board members and editors for the journal. So I've presented this kind of as a inverted pyramid, but it really, each of these layers kind of build upon itself, is that the starting point is publishing excellent articles, and then, giving that back in terms of critiquing other articles in the same field. And then finally, the summary of that experience, if you so choose to give back to the journal, would be serving as an editorial board member or editor. And that's all I have for my intro comments.
Great. Thank you all. Learned a lot about opportunities I hadn't known about before. Now we'll move into the Q&A portion. And so let me just get these shut down. Please enter any questions into the chat, and we will pose them to our panelists. I have one to start though. So I'll direct this first one to Dr. Park. And the question is, I think many SYCL members earlier in their career, so like myself included, sometimes can be intimidated by the publication process and the perceived requirement of novelty. So what advice do you have for SYCL members on how to get started? And I know, Dr. Park, you mentioned a little bit about forming collaborations. So do you have any other, words of advice for SYCL members on how to get started and kind of get over this barrier?
Right, I think it part of this is where you are in that early part. If you're still in your fellowship, I think your time is not your own, unfortunately. And so you're really reliant on the mentors you have in your institution or other folks that you've met and working on their projects. I think thinking about projects that you can take with you as you take the next step. So if you're going to go into academic medicine and you're going into an assistant professor position, during that transition is the time to think about, well, what do you find interesting? That's important. But just as important as that, I think, is finding what your institution offers. So, and I think this is important, and this is just something I've done in my career, which is being flexible between what I want to do with what opportunities are available. An example would be, let's say you like cardiac markers. That's great, but here's the part of that which is difficult, which is, are you going to be able to find a new cardiac marker in the way that your position is set up? It's going to be very hard. And so if in your same institution, they have a clinical research group that does not have any clinical laboratory involvement in the discovery of biomarkers for who knows what disease, I would say that that is your best bet for quickly becoming an expert in a new area. So really go towards, and I've heard this from other senior researchers. I remember in grad school, I heard it from someone that said, go where everyone is not. And that is very true for laboratory medicine. If you're at an institution that has a new diagnostic technology, that's where you should focus on. And when you look at a journal like Clinical Chemistry, it's it's hard to be specific about what we're going to accept, because we'll, you know, the caveat will be, oh, we want something new, we want something groundbreaking, and it's hard to define that. What's easy is if there is something brand new out there that people are starting to realize is important, and you could show that it's clinically useful and you're the first, even if it's a small study, journals like Clinical Chemistry or even, you know, any of the clinical subspecialty journals would be very interested. So just keep that in mind. Another way to gauge this is if you're interested in a topic, search, you know, the journal website and see, has that been published before and what has been required. And that's where you'll see this sharp demarcation between an area that's very established, like cardiac biomarkers. The level of evidence you need to bring is tremendous. You need almost like a multi-institutional study at this point. Versus if it's something brand new, you know, a new proteomic platform, then the type of clinical evidence required is going to be much less. So just kind of keep that in mind, engage that as you're choosing topics and choosing mentors, you know, what are you interested in versus what's available, and what's the novelty in terms of, has this already been published 1,000 times, or will your publication be the first?
Thank you. I think that's great advice, especially for folks coming out of training, to kind of think about it in that way. Dr. Chambliss, do you want to comment on that question too before we move on to the next one?
Sure. So I think, you know, from the Academy perspective, none of our publications are really about the original research. So, you know, that, and probably I see Dustin shaking his head, so probably similar for clinical laboratory news. You know, it might be like a description of research that was done and published elsewhere. But it, you know, you don't need to submit your original research, you know, to do a scientific short, for example. And so I think these kind of simpler, shorter article types can be a great way to start building your kind of publication portfolio without needing to invest a lot of time or resources into, you know, an original research project. Or there may be some people that, you know, just aren't going to have the time in their position or the resources in their position to participate in original research. And I think, you know, like Jason said, participating in collaborations and that sort of thing can be an avenue for that original research. But there's also a lot of opportunities within ADLM and elsewhere to publish other types of articles where you don't need to be as novel or as forward thinking. You know, that we have a lot of laboratorians in our profession who could really just use some practical advice. And so I think, you know, avenues like the Academy Scientific Shorts or CLN are great places where you don't necessarily have to have that hard science or require that level of novelty. And you can still list these types of articles on your CV. Typically, they're going to be in a separate category from the peer-reviewed article, but they still can hold some weight and kind of start to build your credibility in the field.
Yeah, thanks. Those are great. That's great insight. I think too, it also builds your credibility, also your confidence as an author, and your willingness to kind of tackle other and maybe more challenging publication types. So that's great. Thank you, audience, for submitting such wonderful questions. We're going to go to one of the audience questions. This one is going to come to you, Dr. Christensen, first. What is your recommendation for authors about reaching out to editors to gauge interest in a publication idea prior to submission? What do you think about that? And like, what is considered to be best practice?
Okay, so I think that you know, a lot of times we in the laboratory sort of sell ourselves short, right? I mean, probably everybody on this call has done some original work. You would have had to get awarded a PhD, right? You have to do novel work. So that is, I guess that's one thing. The other is in the lab that we do a lot of, we offer a lot of things that other researchers want, like the ability to get safety labs, for example, if you're working into a trial. So sometimes I think that the discussion about collaboration was really important. Specifically, to answer your question, I think that if you have an idea, you know, I'm a big believer in proper preparation prevents poor performance, right? Go in and research actually what's been done in that area. And if you can find a niche in that area, and then you can support your idea, that notion, okay, well, here is an area, kind of like what Dr. Park said, that nobody has gone to yet, but it's really important. And I would like to contribute a review to that area. I can work with this other person. I can collaborate on it. To me, that's the kind of letter that I read, that I am impressed by, it makes me think that this person is that you remember it, that this person really has an idea that's worthy. I think a lot of people have ideas, but a lot of times they're not well developed, and that's what I think you want to do, is have a colleague read what you might send in, just to get their feedback too. So I think phoning a friend and a lot of these interactions are very important for putting together something that you're going to send out to someone that you're going to ask them for, if an idea is appropriate for a commission or for an idea for publication.
Thank you. Dr. Park, would you be willing to comment too, since I'm guessing you probably received some of these as well?
Right, I agree with Rob 100% that these are some of the most interesting inquiries. Some of them are excellent, where someone they have expertise, or they've identified a gap, and these are terrific. These are the ones where it's very easy to say, yeah, send me more, send me an abstract or send me an outline of what you're talking about, and let's think about it more. And I would say, especially for SYCL members, that's something that I'm very sympathetic to and want to help with. I think where it kind of goes off the rails is when it's someone very senior in the field, so not really applicable to this group, where it's someone very senior in the field who's using the platform to just kind of like bounce ideas. And that's where it becomes a little awkward, because it's something that should be developed a little bit more before it's presented. I think a starting point is looking in the literature or looking at what's been published in the journals. I think for clinical chemistry, the website is actually a very good search engine. Sometimes, most of the time, that's how I look up papers that have been recently published for myself. I think, this is kind of totally sidelined to this question, but finding interest and identifying, topics, part of this will be your personality. And my personality is I often talk to the people in my hallway about ideas and try to, get a better sense of that. And it's the same thing at the journal level. I'm always talking to members of our editorial board and other senior and associate editors of the journal to think about ideas. And so that may appeal to some of you, to talk to your colleagues and peers. But then some of you, for some people, it's much more internal. And so I think in that case, that's when you really need to use search engines like PubMed and the journal ones to see what's out there. But I think it could be a combination of kind of just reflecting off of other people. But then I think when you're at the point where, you're thinking about a study and you have some of the pieces together, especially as a SYCL member, in your position, I would feel free to email me for that.
Great, thanks. I think we'll go to the next audience question. Dr. Bunch, this one's coming to you first, but I will ask all of you. So with the rebranding of AACC to ADLM, are there any changes to any of these, publications? So either in name or in topics that you'll be looking to cover in your publications?
So for clinical laboratory news, I don't see a huge change coming down the line for us. We've already kind of covered laboratory medicine for many years. There's our name, clinical laboratory news, doesn't really need changed in this context. So I think there's not going to be a huge change for us. We have, due to, publication costs and things like that, we've gone from having 8 publications a year to 6 publications a year, but that's just due to printing costs for us. So there has been some slight changes. We've yet to find anyone that noticed, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I would say that we don't expect major changes. We just to tail in onto the previous question, for us, we would recommend you reach out to us before spending a lot of time on a topic, just because we are very selective and do an invitation only as most of our workflow. So for that, and we're already planning, 9 months ahead of time. So we definitely don't want people to spend a lot of times on a topic that we're not going to accept. So we would like you to run things past at least the editorial board or the editor. So
Thank you. That is good to know about CLN. So reach out before you write for CLN. Dr. Chambliss, do you want to tackle the any changes to the Academy with the rebranding?
Sure. So we might be the only ones of the four of us that actually did have a name change associated with the organization's name change, at least to my knowledge. So we did, the Academy, historically, most of you on this call probably weren't around at this time, was called NACB, the National Academy for Clinical Biochemistry. And then several years ago, changed its name to the AACC Academy. And so, of course, now last year with AACC changing to ADLM, we also changed the name of the Academy again to the Academy for Diagnostics and Laboratory Medicine, but we're still using the Academy as kind of the informal name within the organization. And that was true before the name change. And so that continues to be true. And then, I think we have always been kind of more broader than clinical chemistry when it comes to Academy content. I think that's true of most of the organization, and is why, what led the organization to kind of the name change in the first place. And so I don't anticipate a lot of major changes to the Academy and the Academy content. We have upcoming guidance documents in, say, the areas of coagulation testing, respiratory virus testing with a team of clinical microbiologists. So we plan to kind of continue to be more broad in our definition of laboratory medicine, while still being the home for the academically focused clinical chemists as well.
And just to climb on Allison's shoulders for a second and do the same thing. I mean, that was one of the things that attracted me to the to be editor-in-chief of JALM, was the fact it was the Journal of Applied Laboratory Medicine, not limited. So I saw that, I think for many years this is what we've all been doing, and I think the name change was a very healthy thing. And I don't see us doing anything different. We're, one of our number one areas we're looking for papers for is molecular diagnostics, and also microbiology. We've done special topics on sepsis, for example, and other areas. So I see this as a healthy change, and we're not making any difference. I don't know, Jason, how about you? Do you see any difference in clin chem?
No, I think that, in parallel to the discussions, I didn't know the name change was occurring for AACC until pretty, far into the process. But in parallel to that, when I had the opportunity to lead the journal, that was one of the first things I wanted to do, to have, you can't change the name of the journal. Well, it's very difficult to change the name of the journal because it has all these downstream consequences in terms of metrics and listing. But I wanted to have a reflection that the journal was much more laboratory medicine oriented than the historic title would suggest. What I found interesting about the journal when I started publishing in it, 15 years ago, was that, the editors were publishing PCR type studies back in the 1980s. Mass spec has been, widely published in the journal for decades. So I think these things, again, they happen in parallel. And I guess in retrospect, it's not that surprising, because the folks publishing in JALM or ClinChem, these are the same folks that are leading, the change of on the administrative side of the association. So I think these things all kind of came together, and, certainly didn't lead to a big change in clinical chemistry.
Thanks for that. As I tell my kids, chemistry is everything. Chemistry, it all comes back to chemistry. So maybe the name is fitting for everything after all. Another audience question. So what publishing advice can we offer for SYCL or ADLM members who are not in academic practice? This is an important part of our membership. And so any advice for that?
Well, from the JALM perspective, I think we have a number of different types of contributions. Some that are we call reflections, which are really from people in industry, from anywhere, any engagement in the laboratory medicine field, that can give insights into an issue, into what I really like is unmet needs. Somebody that is not necessarily doing research in an area, but somebody that could tell us about a need that's unmet at this point, a way to detect hemolysis and whole blood samples, or somebody from another field who is able to really come into the field with a fresh outlook. So these sorts of small pieces, 750 words or whatever, can come from anywhere, and we encourage that.
Dr. Bunch, do you have any advice to give for folks that are not in academic practice?
I would say, just in general from publications, like most of my publications were not funded research things. They were more focused on operational things. I love myself a stability study that is actually useful for the community. You find these things that sometimes you're like, hey, I've had this problem, and you go to a conference and they say, well, this has been a problem for a long time. We've known about it, but it's like, no one's published it. So people are doing these experiments over and over again because of that. So I think these are things that are useful for all the community. And I think these are very ways of getting involved in it. That's been my experience. And also, when you start working on workflow, especially when we start talking about like the application of informatics to the lab space, how things are being put together is sometimes difficult for many people. And so I think those are things that if you have a great solution, I would wish you would publish that.
Yeah, that's great. I know whenever we're asked a question in my lab, and if we can't find evidence in the literature, we're like, well, we should do a study, and then we should make sure we make this available for others to learn from so that they may not have to go through what we've gone through. Great. We're getting a little bit short on time, so I would like to go to the next question, and that is, what strategies do you have for prioritizing scholarly activities or publishing among all the other activities that demand our time? Dr. Chambliss, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, this is a great question and can be a tough thing to do for sure. It certainly depends on the type of position that you're in, right? So if you're in an academic position and you may or may not have protected time for scholarly activity, or if you're in a position where there's no protected time at all, that can be difficult. I've worked in 2 academic positions now since graduating from training fellowship. And in both positions, like by contract, I've had some, small amount of what should be protected time by contract for scholarly activity. And so in order to make sure that I actually use that time and protect that time, I typically use Outlook calendar blocking. So I'll block off a few hours each week. On a good week, that might be like I didn't want any meetings on Friday, and I have a good 4 hours that I can dedicate to something that I've been intending to write up. On a really busy week, it might mean I'm blocking off a half hour here and there to kind of just keep things moving along. But this has really helped me, and I also keep a kind of a running to-do list of scholarly activities or things I've been meaning to write up, or deadlines that I have for, maybe projects I'm working on with other people, kind of prioritized by a deadline, so that when I do get to that blocked off time, I know, okay, this is what I should work on today. And so that's been really helpful. I find that if I don't block off the time, your time gets sucked up by everything going on at work. And so if you have the protected time, you should really find a way to use it.
Great. I agree. Dr. Park, do you have any suggestions for this?
I would second everything Allison has said. That could be a good thing to put on a tweet, like the ways to organize your life. And I think that's very important, because I think many academic clinical laboratory positions, you may get protected time, or maybe, you may be told you'll just figure it out. If you become really efficient, then you'll just figure it out. And I think that's very hard, especially early on, when you can't differentiate what's important and what's not important in terms of pushing things off. So in addition to everything Allison said, which I think is really important, I really like the blocking Outlook. I certainly do that when something needs to be written or reviewed and it's gone on too long. One thing that's very helpful, and it takes a while to develop, is finding those collaborations. So if you can find a clinician or two that you can work on long-term projects with, you will become that laboratory expert for that field. Now, those relationships won't happen overnight. And I would say for every one you try to grow, there will probably be two that are like a disaster and just take up your time and have no productivity. But try to find people you enjoy working with and that you can collaborate with outside of the laboratory. I think that's also helpful academically as you progress in your career. And then for folks that are not in academics, if you're at reference labs, going back to something Dustin said, with all of these new projects using informatics, people need validation validation data sets. So if you work in a large reference lab and you can somehow structure the data and get buy-in from your corporation to provide validation for academic studies, that's going to help the whole field move along. So that's something to think about is what can you do? You may not have time to write studies, but maybe you can be facilitating having data coming from your group to validate other studies. And then the final thing is social media and its use of providing information and education. I think we've seen from our association that we've had a lot of people that have really helped in terms of education through things like Twitter and YouTube. And so I would encourage you to look at that.
Great. Thank you. I think we only have time for one more question. So I would like to ask one about reviewing, because I know SYCL members can be, getting more and more involved in being a reviewer during the peer review process. But can you talk a little bit about what your expectations are for reviewers? So maybe Dr. Christensen, and specifically like what makes an effective, what are you looking for in like an effective review for manuscripts? And do you have any resources to recommend if somebody is wanting to know kind of?
Yeah, and I think Dr. Park hit it on the head. I mean, really the best way to become a viewer is to develop an area of expertise, of acknowledged expertise. So when you do a search, when someone does a search, they come up with your name. What we'd like to do, I think, is if we typically choose 2 reviewers, we might, if we did this cycle, we go this cycle route, we might go with 3 reviewers, and one of those, and a 3rd reviewer would be a SYCL member who would contribute to that as well, and that might help that would help them to develop. They get graded, 1+, 2+, 3+ kind of grading, or to do it, and they could read the other reviews and see what others have said, and I think that's a good way to do it. I tell you, a lot of it is just being willing to sit down, and like anything else, it's hard work. Reviewing is hard work. You have to spend the time doing it. Sometimes I'm doing it and I say, I'm spending more time doing this than I do with my own work. What am I, crazy? So I think I think you have to be willing to put in the work. The reviews that are not helpful are real short. Oh, I really love this paper, you should publish it immediately. That's not helpful. Always there's things you could, and the devil's in the detail. Even details with papers that you say, well, they could do this a little better, or so on. I'll stop there because, but I think that's the thing. It's just when you do it, do a good job at it.
Thank you. Do any other panelists have anything to add for that?
I would just add on top of what Rob said. I agree with what he's saying. And if you get asked to be a reviewer, you're being asked. Like someone went through a process and they're asking you. So, this is your interaction with the journal, especially if you're early in your career, and try to make a good impression in terms of being comprehensive, and think through that paper. And don't do it in terms of finding reasons to reject. I've seen that approach and I totally disagree with it. I would say the best way to review a paper is to take it where it's at and say, what would make this a great paper? And I think those are the really helpful ones, because you may identify things that the authors can't do. But at the end of the day, I think it's much more positive and everyone gets something out of that experience.
All right. Thanks. We are nearing the end of the hour. There are a few questions that we did not get to. So I'm sorry about that. But I would really like to make sure we have time to thank our panelists again. Thank you, Drs. Bunch, Chambliss, Christensen, and Park, for spending your time with us and for so graciously sharing your perspectives and your tips related to scientific publication. So for SYCL members who might have questions about publishing with ADLM journals, you may or may not know that CLN Hold on, I'm just trying to share my screen. Hopefully y'all can see that. So CLN, the Journal of Applied Laboratory Medicine and Clinical Chemistry, every year has a SYCL liaison. So this is a member of the SYCL core committee that sits on the editorial board of the journal and is able to kind of, help with proposing topics that might be, and find authors within the SYCL membership to write on those topics. And so if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. So here are the three liaisons for this year, but the best way to reach us is by emailing us at this email address, and we will get back to you. So thank you all for attending today's session, and we look forward to seeing you at another SYCL event soon. Thank you.
Thanks for putting the session together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.